Hello, Caton. We're going to take a look at your Follow the Sun posting as well as the takeaway imagery that you put up onto the blog. Apologies for maybe some of the graininess of the image. It is early in the morning, and so the light hasn't quite come in yet. Um, so the screen is or the camera on the screen is going to be a little bit fuzzy, at least on me, not the images, which is the important part. So here's your Follow the Sun posting. I see everybody has gotten used to getting their name on there and doing the underscore and so on. That's awesome. All right, so Follow the Sun, you starting off with your midday stuff. This is really kind of cool. I like what you're doing here with these sort of minimal objects. It directly relates to what we'll reference, in your takeaway where you're talking about shadows and light and so on. Yeah, photographs that are simply of shadows it can be quite beautiful, and it gets to the heart of what photography is. And so, this kind of approach is very healthy. I'm interested to see how you explore this further. One minor note, here we have the hose kind of entering in at the corner up here, and then you can see there's a gap down here. The gap down here is good. The corner thing is what you want to avoid. The gap could be even a little bit larger, bringing it up to maybe where this leaf is. Here's the idea. When we have stuff coming out of the corner, what happens is our eyes immediately are drawn to that. If you think about a composition as a dynamic shape to begin with, so you have your shape of your composition, which is a rectangle, and without anything else in it, nothing. It's just a blank, white, black, whatever, rectangle. The most interesting parts of that are going to be the corners, because the corners create that energy, right? Everything else is just sort of straight on. So when we have elements that are entering into the composition from the corner, what we're doing is we're emphasizing something that doesn't need emphasizing. We don't need to emphasize the corner of the composition. It's already going to be dynamic. In fact, what we have to do is be able to pull the viewer's eye away from those corners so that it moves freely around the composition. A lot of times you can kind of get around this because you might have a lot of complexity within the composition itself. However, because your approach here on this image is so minimal, the exact placement of everything becomes really, really crucial. Think of it like if you had a song with just, 3 notes, those 3 notes would have to be exactly right, placed with exactly the right moment in time in order for them to work. Same thing kind of happens here. So very minor thing. However, if we had this element right here that I'm circling, if that was maybe down here and then this was pulled up just a little bit, basically pulling back a little bit on your composition, it would have been improved. Beautiful use of shadows here. However, that's really the point, I know. Again, we have these objects kind of hitting into the corner. You'll start to recognize that. I'm going to emphasize it for everybody. That, these corner sort of things, and when you're composing within your frame, you're going to go like, oh, no, that's in the corner. We're going to kind of move it away. So I'll stop harping on that, but at the same time, this is such a beautiful rendering. I think it deserves to be sort of cleaned up. If the line was right here to the end of the composition, without right here, you would just immediately notice if you put a sort of your hand there, how much we're able to get over to this side of the composition there. But regardless, this is quite beautiful. This, excuse me, this is the nature of these shadows are definitely midday, because you can tell how sharp they are. However, you can also tell, and I want people to to begin to even start to notice this as photographers, how the nature of that will change based on the time of year. We're in December now. The height of that sun, even at midday, is not going to be as high up in an angle on the planet as it would be if it were summertime. So in July, the nature of the midday shadows would look shorter and probably even more sharp. Here we're at our altitude, at our positioning latitudinal positioning where we are. That positions the sun in a different place, and so the shadows are going to appear a bit longer during midday in December than they would be in July. It's less dramatic back east where I come from, Florida, because Florida is lower, closer to the equator, and so the sun isn't going to change as dramatically from winter to summer in terms of its angle in the sky, although it does change, not quite as dramatically as it does out here in Colorado. Here again, we're getting into, getting into I don't know what, cloudy overcast midday, I suppose, is what you were kind of talking about. An interesting take, to kind of identify, yeah, it's cloudy overcast and it's midday. So I think that's fine. I don't necessarily think that there's any problem with that, where you're identifying where here's its bright sun, here's where it's overcast, what you're focusing on here becomes more shape-based. Cloudy overcast during midday tends to be a little bit more like blue hour, although it's not quite there. But it does tend to be a little bit more like blue hour because those clouds really just diffuse the light. Today, this is December, what are we now? December 12th. So it's Saturday, December 12th, quite cloudy out. It may snow again, but this would be, interfering with golden hour. You couldn't have golden hour on a day like this because you're not going to get the direct sun cutting through these deep clouds. Golden hour, let's take a look at what we have as solutions for golden hour. I can see definitely that you are identifying the right quality of light. Time of day is less relevant when we're talking about these different lighting conditions, because time of day can change based on, the time of day that this light happens can change based on what time of year, as I was mentioning before. Kind of a cool shot right here, this with the moon. You've got this real order happening here. This is beautiful, Caton. I can tell you're comfortable out here. I can tell that this is a place where you feel confident in making these kinds of images. This is exquisite, really. They're just so simple, quite organized, but at the same time, there's an energy and a beauty to it. Take a look at Moonrise over Hernandez. That's an Ansel Adams photograph. And you'll see what I mean about how I'm connected to what you're doing here. This is quite good. Again, you're seeing those long shadows, they're softer. You're seeing the color of the light, which is shifted just a little bit. The angle is such that it is still hitting the moon. And that's what's going on there. Again, looking at the light here as a sort of almost like, kissing these things, like smooch, 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 it's great. This is exactly how to work with it. You nailed it on these. Again, a little bit of the energy coming from the corners. That's something that you can easily start to recognize and overcome. Let's get to your blue hour. Now, blue hour, of course, you're not going to have those kinds of directional light. You are now focusing a little bit more on shape, a lot more on shape here. This soft photo is quite lovely, actually. You would think that as a photographer, I would be offended by it's all out of focus. No, not at all. I am anything but, drawn to traditional photography. I think that when we start to explore the boundaries of what a photograph is allowed to be, we soon discover that it can be just about anything, like painting. Now, it becomes a bit minimal. I think you could have brought this element up here to about the third right here. You've got this positioned pretty well, this little mark here, and then the transition of light is quite nice. But I think we could have brought this up just a little bit more. That would have improved it. These are all just minor things. Down here, because of the backlighting, you lose the detail down here. Now I can see, I have a very high resolution screen. I'm looking at this on, it's 32-inch screen. And I can barely make out the information here. Your exposure could have been just a little bit brighter, just a little bit longer. We don't want to lose this sense of beauty here. I know what you're trying to capture, but just a breath of more light, meaning a breath more time, would have illuminated this a little bit more and given it a little bit more of a balanced feel to it. Now, this one didn't quite work for you. It just appears like camera shake rather than the movement that you might have been thinking about. And there just isn't enough to hold it together. I applaud you, though, for trying to experiment with something like that. Wow, what a bone. If you've got more of these, you got to let me know so, so we can collect them and bring them into the studio. If you know a location that you can find these things, it's great. This is an excellent subject matter to be working with during blue hour: texture, shape. You're not going to have the directional light, but you definitely have the sort of shadow areas. The exposure here is just about right. I think you might have brought it up a little bit more. This is a great candidate for bringing into Photoshop and making some very minor improvements to really let it sing in terms of luminosity. I think it would have vastly improved. Now we have the mixed lighting where you're working with, artificial lighting at blue hour. And this is a challenge, really, because it's fleeting. It changes very quickly, and you're looking for that balance. This is where your strategy here on this image, I think, works quite well. We talked a little bit about your photography being something that I think a graphic designer or other kind of designer might be very interested in. I mean, you're going to need to be working with a graphic designer with your photography because you're just so good at laying things out in a way that allows for other elements to be incorporated into it, while at the same time creating an image that is incredibly balanced. Even coming back to this image, which I mentioned, that could have used a little bit more of the tree. If you had an article, in a magazine or on a blog or vlog or whatever, right here where I'm circling, that would have been an excellent place to have located those things. Here, the light got away from me, and now we're just talking about nighttime photography, and that's part of what I wanted you guys to discover, is where the limitations are for this balance. This is by far the most balanced of the images. Yes, it's soft. Who cares? It still has movement and energy to it. And, this is where you really caught it, right? This is the balance between the blue light and the artificial light. As you go here, this is clearly too dark. This is clearly too dark. This is nighttime photography, and so on. So that's really going to be the main difference on those. Other than that, I mean, excellent work there. Oops. Excellent work on the lighting. Your compositions outdoors are stellar. Really great. So here's your final 18. You're using these as examples to your writing. This is a beautiful image. Once again, your sort of tendency to leave space for other things in a photograph, just outstanding. Just outstanding. So you in your statement, you kind of, it's almost like you have this vision statement that you're creating here. I really think that it's great. You're contextualizing your knowledge. In other words, you're trying to do something with what you've learned, and you're identifying the sort of way in which you're approaching photography, and that is from the perspective of the power of shadows, which is, very smart of you. That's, there's a lot of writing, there's a lot of history based off of photographers recognizing that shadows are essentially at the heart of energy within a photograph, because without shadows, you just have you just have information. And so the shadows really identify direction. They emphasize what time of day, or at least indicate what time of day. All of that kind of stuff becomes very important. In fact, 3 of the 5 characteristics of light have to do with shadows, right? Direction positions the shadows in a particular way. Hardness has everything to do with the nature of the shadows, of course. And contrast, again, has to do with the nature of the shadows, because we're talking about the spaces in between the darkest dark and the lightest light. So excellent stuff. I see how you have grown over the term. I am very much interested to see how you approach the digital side of it, the sort of manipulating or correction end of it, the printing of it, as well as possibly what you might be able to do with time-based media, which is a natural extension to still photography. So I look forward to keep working with you. I hope I see you in my photo and video classes later on. And you have a nice break. We'll see you in 21. All right. Bye-bye now.